We expect when people are married, there's only a need for two consenting parties, the two people marrying one another. Paul and Hava were enthusiastically consenting partners, their marriage supported by their dedicated and tenacious parents. However, because they have developmental disabilities, their own consent was not enough. Paul and Hava's ability to marry was constantly called into question.
We got married. Yes. Right on, honey.
This is their story.
How did you meet Paul? How did you know him?
Paul and Hava.
You met in a program? And what did you think when you met him? Did you think he was cute?
Yeah.
What else did you think about him?
Adorable.
Adorable.
And did you like the way he sang?
Yeah.
So he was in shows with you?
Yeah.
What show?
Quiz.
Their love for each other is absolutely amazing. So when they're performing, you make you want to cry because you can feel the love.
They are like the perfect couple, you know? Yeah, they really did a good job.
You know, Paul and Hava are a lot of fun. They're really easy to spend time with.
Me and Hava went on our first date at our bicycle club.
It was dance.
Then Hava, she invited me.
What did Bonnie say to her mom, to Roseanne?
Oh, does Paul have a sports jacket?
What did Mom say?
I said, he's got a whole suit.
Yes.
You guys wanted to see each other more. We were able to see that they started to develop a real commitment to each other also. Yeah. They were very much, we could see that they were in love.
We always tell people their relationship is like a gift to us that we never thought we'd have. Mike and I have discussed it. My friend Cindy said, well, you expect your child with a disability to love you. Well, if you think they're going to love you, why shouldn't they love someone else? Why shouldn't they have a partner? Which I thought was an eye-opener.
Paul took a big initiative when he went up to visit the...
Albany.
Where did he go?
Albany.
That's
went to
right.
Albany.
Yeah. What happened when you went to Albany, Paul?
Oh, Mommy, and then I told Senator Developmental that I wanted to get married to my beautiful girlfriend, Hava, because I love her very much.
Paul advocated for himself.
Right.
And got the ball rolling.
I sent him a letter asking, can they be married? And the senator's office wrote back that, yes, indeed, they could be married, and whatever we can do to help you, we'd be happy to help you. They then facilitated that big meeting that we had with the state and the agencies that ran the two group homes. You know, from that meeting sprung a lot of, I think, inspiration on the part of the parents to help Paul and Hava be married, because they really, if it was up to them, if they didn't have parents who were advocates for them, they would not be married regardless of how wonderful their relationship is.
Paul, Hava, and their parents were determined to find a pathway to marriage, but their need for individualized supports, while also seeking housing as a married couple, led them to experience unexpected hurdles.
Somebody actually said, once they get married, you're opening up a can of worms.
Can of worms.
It was the can of worms excuse. Well, we said, well, then let's open up the can of worms. You know, we need to do this.
One of the things that's unique about Paul and Hava's story, too, is that they live in a group home and that they need assistance with some of their daily life tasks, with living independently. But that really isn't and shouldn't be a barrier to how we think about them and their story, and how we think about other people who need a similar level of support.
What I always suggest to people is to ask those who are resistant, what worries you about this? What are your fears? So we can really understand what's underneath the feeling of resistance. And is it worried somebody's going to be hurt? Are you worried that someone's going to get taken advantage? Like, what is the worry?
I think that there's probably a million excuses why you shouldn't do this, right? It's really easy to come up with all the what ifs. And, what if we did this? What could go wrong? What would people think? Is this okay? And I think that there's really only one thing to consider, and it's the right thing to do.
The law states that two people looking to be a married party must be consenting. When concerns were raised about Paul and Hava's ability to consent to sex, their parents sought out additional resources and education.
We were told that Paul and Hava could not be married because they could not consent. And the tool that was being used to see if they were consenting was the SCAT test. So first of all, we didn't know what the heck that was.
The SCAT test, or Socio-Sexual Knowledge and Attitudes Test, is one of multiple assessments used in the field to determine sexual consent. In New York State, individual agencies have discretion in deciding how and when to provide sexual education and assess for consent.
Hava's agency tested her without any education, without our knowledge. They used the SCAT test, and they used it as a pass-fail rather than as an assessment.
I teach 4th grade. I teach long division. I wouldn't test my kids on long division without teaching them first.
It doesn't have to be as serious as marriage. It could just be, I want to explore dating this person, or I want to see where this goes. And one of the challenges is that all of a sudden you have a provider agency who's part of that conversation, and then the parents are looped in. And I think most people would find that to be a pretty significant invasion of privacy. Having to, take a test or fill out a form just to engage in sex.
We took a trip to the law library just to find out what our rights are. And we discovered that it was the agency's responsibility to give sexual counseling if it was wanted it, if they wanted it, but they weren't doing it. We also purchased the YAI online curriculum, and then it became our project to make sure that Paul and Hava could pass a sexual consent test. And I worked with them. Worked out really well. Hava was always comfortable with me.
Yeah.
Paul also. And, there's no embarrassment. We just did it. We just followed the SCAT assessment. We went through everything, answered all the questions. We did it for months. And I don't even remember how many months.
Data Bank helped me.
So the barriers for people with disabilities around sexuality and relationships primarily are around beliefs and attitudes that people have. Many people think people with disabilities are not sexual people, so they don't need any information, probably don't want to be in relationships, definitely can't be married. It's important for parents to address the topic because if we don't teach healthy sexuality, someone else is going to teach unhealthy sexuality.
A lot of times people with developmental disabilities are excluded from sexual education, sexual health training. People draw conclusions about whether or not they're able to consent to sex, whether or not they're able to have loving, healthy relationships with other people. And I think other people's ideas about what they can and cannot do really can serve as barriers to people having healthy relationships.
Often people with disabilities are not seen as sexual beings, because so often we are not included in those conversations because people assume that because maybe a certain part of our body doesn't work, that we're not able to participate in a sexual relationship. Or if we have a mental or emotional disability, that we may not understand what sex is or may not even want it. And in some cases, there may be some people that are not interested in sex, but that's not everyone. People with disabilities can have loving, sexual, romantic relationships just like anybody else. And they should receive the supports to do so.
So then after the education and the SCAT test and the evaluation by YAI by Dr. Kismirska, and then she brought it to the committee for review and they were consulting, then the agency said, we don't have to accept a consent from an outside agency.
And the only thing that we could do from there was to go back to our attorneys and to pursue a legal suit to get some place for them to live.
On the advice of their lawyers, The Forziano and Samuels families began moving forward with their wedding plans, with the plan being that they would continue to search for appropriate housing for Paul and Hava.
It was at Barney Norm's house, and then I went to propose to Hava on her birthday. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I love you. You got a wife?
Oh. Bye.
Congratulations. Mazel tov.
We had a big engagement party.
I don't
think we knew at the time for sure we were going to have a big wedding or a wedding after the engagement party. I think that was like the big thing.
Yeah.
And that was fun, right? How was the engagement?
Yeah.
Where did we do the engagement party?
Firehouse in Sound Beach.
My best friend, 2 of her sons were getting married that year also. That year we had 7 weddings to go to. We had a lot of friends. So my best friend since childhood, one of her sons is my godson. He was getting married, and so was her other son, Joey. So we were doing the same things that year that I never thought that I would be doing with Paul, because he's our only child. I never thought I would be going to tuxedo rentals and engagement parties and picking out rings and all the stuff that she was doing with her boys, I was doing with Paul, which was something we hadn't done together since the kids were like 2, because her boys were then ahead of Paul in many things. So that was really, really fun for us. And her 2 boys were in their wedding party, and Paul was in their boys' wedding party.
And I remember feeling so lucky that Hava was could possibly have somebody to be with, somebody to share her life with, and somebody that she could lie next to and hold hands with and feel
not be alone.
Her.
I was panicking at one point. Well, what happens if they get married and they're unhappy and it doesn't work out? What are we going to do? And Paul and Hava's MSc immediately said to me, well, Mrs. Forziano, they'll get a divorce just like anybody else.
Never.
We don't talk about how do we allow people to explore the options of getting through situations, and what are their options. We don't talk about how we help them get through a difficult situation. We talk about who's going to clean it up for them.
I think the adjustment was harder on those of us who were worried about it than them, because they weren't worried at all, because they knew that they were in love and that they were going to be happy together.
After months of planning, Paul and Hava had a venue selected and a date picked. On April 12th, 2013, Paul and Hava said, I do.
I saw Hava in her wedding gown, walking down the aisle with my mother and my father, and there was tears in my eyes seeing her.
And as you, Hava, place this ring upon your bridegroom's finger as a token of wedlock.
It was a beautiful, beautiful ceremony. Hava and Paul deserve each other. I've never seen 2 people so much in love that help each other and complement each other.
Despite being a married couple, Paul and Hava still were not able to live together. For 3 months after their wedding, they lived in separate group homes where they were not able to spend the time they would like with one another. Their parents would take turns hosting them at their homes over the weekend so that they could spend alone time together as a married couple.
What was the hard thing?
Finding a place to live.
You had to live separately April, May, June, and then July 1st. So that's 3 months that you were separate. You were married, but you couldn't live together.
No.
So in an attempt to resolve the lawsuit, the state put out an email to to the agencies. They asked who wanted to house this married couple. They were already married.
When a call was put out to provider agencies on Long Island looking for anyone who would be willing to house and provide individualized supports for a married couple, the administration at East End Disability Associates, a newer provider organization on Long Island, responded.
I have a very special connection because I've known Hava since she was 12 years old. I worked with her when she was a child in an after-school program in the early 90s, and Hava was the most adventurous and brave little girl that I had ever encountered. And so when I learned that there was a couple who were wanting to get married and to break down some barriers and to shake things up a little bit, it never surprised me that it was Hava.
On July 1st, 2013, Paul and Hava moved into the apartment where they still live today.
Them being married really doesn't really cause an issue to the other guys that live in the house. So they're pretty much all a family.
They are totally unaffected by their marriage. They're just Paul and Hava. Honestly, the only challenges we have is because the guys like their apartment so much that they want one.
I think the folks that we support are so much more accepting of this than we are as professionals. And I think we could really take our lead from them.
I think for advocacy, you just have to really not be afraid to make people uncomfortable if there's something that you think has to be done for your child or something that's not being understood about them. You just have to jump in there and do it in a respectful and whatever, way, but you have to put your point across because everybody needs an advocate.
I think we've made great progress over the 10 years. We're in a really good spot now. I mean, the management here has been terrific. Ronnie is great, Andre's great, everybody that works in the house is really good.
I'm just grateful. Yeah, because they bring sunshine into my life.
While Paul and Hava were eventually able to make their dream become a reality, other couples with disabilities may face additional obstacles on their way to marriage. When two people with disabilities marry, there could be a negative effect on their eligibility for Supplemental Security Income, or SSI, and the amount of SSI benefits they receive. This can make it harder for couples to live independently or access necessary care. Commonly referred to as the marriage penalty, this creates a financial disincentive for people with developmental disabilities to marry. Recently, there have been efforts to do away with this penalty through legislation at the federal level.
Paul and Hava's story is one that represents people with disabilities, and it shows people with disabilities that they too have rights and they too can speak up, and they're going to face barriers just like Paul and Hava did, but to keep going and you can get where you want to be and not give up the fight. So I think they're a model for other people with disabilities to say, oh, I can have this in my life.
We support people. People come to us in all shapes, size, colors, relationships, religious beliefs. They come to us as they are, and if we are truly committed to person-centered services and individualized services, this should just be part of the package.
But we've gotten through 10 years of marriage.
That's right, 10 years.
You still happy?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, Mom. Very
Still in
happy.
love?
Yes, me have a happy living here together.
That's
Happy
great.
day.
Happy to stay at A+ for 10 years.
You love it here, don't you?
Yes,
Yeah, not moving.
Not moving.
Not moving, Mommy, Daddy.
That's good.